Hello and welcome to our Fall 2020 Development Day. It is surreal to find myself speaking to you in front of an empty Hammond Main Lounge, the place where we have gathered so many times as a collective community. So like many times before, I'm at a loss on how to begin because our current state of affairs is one in which none of us is a spectator, nor are the effects unidimensional. Instead, it is, as Martin Monroe has said, these events are both and simultaneously individual and collective, intimate and public, and contemporary and historic. This is in great part because the current state has not only been the product of a novel biological virus, but the multiple outbreaks of social disorders that have been a chronic but ignored illness in our societies. As I mentioned in my letter to you a few weeks ago, I understand that we start the semester with a drained well of enthusiasm from where we derive our energy at the start of every semester. But today, we nonetheless start a new semester, which, similar to the last spring, will test our enthusiasm and energy. So I will borrow heavily from the words of poets, orators, and philosophers to make my points this morning. And I start with the words of the Peruvian novelist Manuel Scorza, who in a poem titled Epistle to the Future Poets wrote the following words. As long as someone looks at the bread with envy, the wheat will not sleep. As long as it rains on the chest of the poor, my heart will not smile. Kill the sadness, poets. Let's kill the sadness with a stick. There are more important things. So we, as a community of educators of future generations, must find this answer and answer the call to resolve to fight back the sadness and the melancholy, so that the history of higher education can say that higher education, and more importantly, public higher education, was in fact a public good. The truth is that we have already begun to write this history. We just have to continue. The day after the 2016 elections, President Barack Obama said the following to his White House staff. It is easy to be hopeful when things are going well, but when you need to be hopeful is when things are at their worst. The work that we have already accomplished is a sign of this hope. So that is where I'd like to go next.
March and May represented probably an unprecedented time in most of our academic experiences. And we will continue to grow on those accomplishments. The hope that of public education will grow based on those accomplishments that we as a community accomplished during these 3 very difficult months. Few of the ones that we accomplished, right? We transferred over to remote teaching over 1,000 sections. We developed a new grading policy. We moved our delivery of labs and clinicals to remote delivery. We moved to virtual setting the offering of library services and tutoring and advising and career services. Using our SSC, we were able to track students who were missing from classrooms. We developed virtual delivery of our recruitment efforts, such as the virtual Falcon Day, the future Falcon Day. We completed the hiring of positions, and we instituted the Helping Falcons program, a program in which faculty, staff, and administrators called over 3,000 students over towards the end of the semester to see how they and their families were doing. The accomplishments of March and May just led to more work between June and July. And that's a lot of the work that many of you have been working on over this time period. A complete transformation of our curriculum, from everything from a seats list that our registrar developed in order for students to know what kind of modality they're learning in, to the delivery of multiple different modalities, not only face-to-face and asynchronous online, but synchronous online, and over, to my last count, 6 different hybrid models that you as instructors have developed in order to accommodate the needs of our students during this time of social distancing. That work will also continued across all the divisions: academics and finance, capital planning and management, student affairs, human resources, and advancement, as we developed a repopulation plan on how all of us were going to return to work, a student repopulation plan, how our students were going to return and begin to do their life back as students, and a faculty FAQ on tidbits on what it would be like once faculty returned to campus. At the end of June, between June 23rd and June 30th, we had 3 truly courageous conversations in which over 400 members of our community, both campus members and greater community members, participated in a conversation of what it meant to them, what were the impacts, and most importantly, a call to action around the movement of Black Lives Matter. And that culminated in a letter from Dr. Lapidus at the end of July, calling us to this call of action, and that accompanied a set of initiatives that we will dedicate ourselves to accomplishing not only this academic year, but moving forward. The accomplishments of March, April, May, June, and July, I'm afraid to say, may pale in comparison to what we will have to continue to work moving forward. But I have no doubt of our capacity to do it. Because we're looking at the outlook of our 2020-2021 academic year. Here, to rely once again on the words of philosophers, and this idea that the apocalypse, or a disruption in our daily lives, in the Greek understanding of it, also means renewal. So as this particular article describes, the pandemic on this reading leaves opportunities for recommencement, rejuvenation, rebirth, and recharging. Recharging of ethics, rebirth of humanitarian values, rejuvenation of political justice, recommencement of a new arrangement of priorities. These words, I think, sound true for us as an educational institution, and also lead us to the call that Lynn Pasquarella, who's president of the AAC&U and a professor of philosophy, calls for institutions to recommit themselves to advancing a liberal education, one that is mindful of the dangers of ideological filtering, and most importantly, how she concludes that by focusing on the foundation, that we focus on equity and quality as the foundations of excellence in undergraduate education in service to our democracy, is now more important and more critical than ever. So it is with that concept and with that context and that calling that we to this academic year. Here we see the cover of our new view book, in where we invite future generations of students to come and join us here at Fitchburg State. here where they can soar and they can find themselves and they can grow. But in order to do that, we're going to focus on 4 things over this coming year. First, campus discussions on education, justice, and being a student-ready college, which are the foundations of our new strategic plan. Our continued implementation of our new LANS, which has at its cornerstone equity, a commitment to inclusive excellence, making sure that our excellence in quality education is inclusive to all. And then clearly our importance of having our self-study prepared for our NECHE accreditors. Starting with these campus discussions, I think we will focus quite a bit of time on having discussions on what it means to be a student-ready college. And because it means many things, we need to make sure that we're all focused on this idea of that we need to change the paradigm of how we think about student success, away from focusing on the deficits of our students and more on their assets, and understanding of how we, both as an institution and as individuals, can build upon and grow those assets so that they may be successful. These are conversations we will have as a community, among your colleagues in departments and units, as well as across divisions and across the university. Our implementation of our LANS is critical. In order to facilitate that, the Center for Teaching and Learning will schedule 5 conversations early in the academic year, looking at our LANS from different perspectives. The first one, a very broad 40,000 foot level look at our LANS and the importance of our LANS right now, of why is it critical that our students leave with a strong liberal arts foundation. Then we will have discussions on the practical, on how to get courses approved, and then finally 3 conversations on our learning outcomes from 3 different perspectives or 3 different groups of our learning outcomes. So please stay tuned on the dates of these conversations. Inclusive excellence. We will build upon the call to action that President Lapidus gave us and look specifically at the initiatives that are in the document that he submitted, that he sent for us to review. Of those, there are many, but these are some that I'd like us to focus on, especially early on. One is a special category, a new category under Special Projects Grant that will be available early this semester, looking at scholarship that explores racial justice and inequality, increase collections of oppressed and underrepresented voices. We will continue to build on our assessment program so that we can now look and include gaps in our curriculum and programming. The development of new programming and mini certificates around anti-racism, equity, and justice. The development of a Dean's Anti-Racism Fund, available for departments and units to bring in assistance and resources to help them rethink curriculum, to carry on special programming and special speakers. And then finally, the creation of a faculty and staff inclusion working group that would allow our colleagues of color to come together and discuss as a group. And then finally, our self-study, for which a great part of today is dedicated to, and I will allow those that will come after me to discuss in greater detail. So I ask that you, in this semester, which is already trying and it is just starting today, take the time and look for these opportunities to be a part of these conversations. Being part of these conversations will be the only way that we as a community will be ready to rebound once we get to a new normal. Our students are waiting. Our students are expecting us. And the public is yearning for public education, public higher education, to fulfill this mission. Pass on to our other speakers. I'd like to thank those that have made this possible. There are many, but few that I know that you know that regardless of development days in person or virtual like this are critical. And that's Kathy Canny, as well as Derisa Webb for their support in putting together today's events. Particularly today, because of our virtual nature, I'd like to thank Steve Swartz and Sherry Hornopoulos, who assisted in recording many of today's events. And I'd like to thank many of you who contributed with ideas for today's events. And I thank you for taking the time for being here today.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Patricia O'Brien, the Senior Vice President of the New England Commission of Higher Education. Dr. O'Brien has worked for the Commission since 2003. Prior to coming to NECHE, she worked at Bridgewater State University, first as the Director of Institutional Research and Assessment, and later as the Associate Vice President for Planning and Assessment. She has also been an adjunct faculty member at several universities, served on various governing boards, and is a member of the board for the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, SARA. Without further ado, Dr. O'Brien.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here at Fitchburg State for your opening of a new academic year. I only wish that we could actually be together in the same place at the same time, but it seems that COVID has other ideas. But in the midst of all of this, you're preparing for a self-study, what I hope will be a wonderful opportunity for you and the entire campus community to reflect on who you are as a university and who you hope to become. I brought along a PowerPoint today that will provide us with an opportunity to think about some of the issues related to the preparation of the self-study. So give me 1 minute while I share my screen and share the PowerPoint with you. So we are going to talk for about the next half hour or so about preparing for reaccreditation. And here's what I think we can usefully cover during that time. At the end of the session, there'll be plenty of opportunity for your questions, so please just jot those down as we go along. I'm going to send this PowerPoint. As a matter of fact, Steve at Fitchburg State already has it, and so it will be available to you in the future. So you don't have to take copious notes on what we do today, other than just record those questions that you want to make sure I address before the end of our time together. So let's start with this slide, which talks about the two purposes of accreditation. This is a slide that we use at NECHE in every single one of our PowerPoint presentations. So if you remember nothing else from this presentation, but of course I hope that you do, please remember this slide because it communicates a bedrock principle of accreditation, which is that it serves two purposes. A first purpose, very important, is to assure the quality of the university to anyone who wants to know. Prospective students, their families, legislators, members of the general public. The fact that you are accredited says Fitchburg State is a high quality place, and that's a very important purpose of accreditation. Equally important, we would argue, which is why the scales are shown in balance, is that other purpose of accreditation, to foster the ongoing improvement, of the university. I have never yet met a college president willing to stand up in front of the campus community and say, we are as good today as we are ever going to be. We're never going to get any better. No president says that because no president believes it. You don't believe it. As good as Fitchburg State University is, you know that there are ways that you can improve. You can improve the quality of your programs and services for your students and all those constituencies that you serve. What the Commission hopes is that your self-study process and accreditation in general serves as a useful vehicle for you to think about that ongoing improvement. So please, as you move through the self-study process over the next couple of years, please keep this slide in mind. Ultimately, your accreditation from NECHE certifies 4 things about Fitchburg State University. First, that you are indeed an institution of higher education, that you have mission and appropriate purposes. Secondly, that you have the resources you need to accomplish your mission and purposes, not somebody else's mission, but yours. Thirdly, that you can demonstrate through evidence that you are indeed accomplishing your mission and purposes. And finally, perhaps most importantly, that you have the ability to continue to do so in the future. Accreditation is ultimately a vote of confidence in the university by the Commission. You're good today, you're going to be even better tomorrow. At the bottom of the slide, we have a little bit of arithmetic for the math professors in the group today. We say accreditation equals standards plus mission. Accreditation is your way to demonstrate, in light of your mission, how you fulfill the standards. More about that before the end of the session. As many of you know, the self-study process has 3 parts: the preparation of the self-study, a site visit by peer evaluators, and then a decision by the Commission in the semester following your visit. The whole thing starts with the standards for accreditation. And as you can see on the slide right now, the standards are, even as we speak, undergoing a small review, the mid-course review. Standards have a useful life of about 10 years, and we're about halfway through that cycle. So there'll be some small changes to the standards that will be adopted in January 2021, about 15 months before your visit. Plenty of time for you to incorporate them in your self-study. There's a note at the bottom that the standards revision process is meant to involve representatives of member institutions. So please be on the lookout for an opportunity to review the proposed changes to the standards and to send in your ideas about those. For now, there are 9 standards, and there will be even after January of 2021. That won't change. These will remain your 9 standards for accreditation. As you're scanning the list, you see that they cover just about every important dimension of quality in higher education, because NECHE is your institutional accreditor. It vouches for the quality of all that you do. There's a 3-part format to each of the standards: a statement of the standard in bold right at the top of the page, followed by a series of numbered paragraphs that explicate the dimensions of quality in that particular standard, and finally, some subheadings throughout the standards to provide organization and clarity, both for you as well as for the visiting team. When the standards were last revised in 2016, there were 3 major changes that aren't going away. You can expect to see those heightened as 2021 comes around with its revisions. The first is there's much less emphasis in the standards now on inputs and much more emphasis on outcomes, particularly, as it says in number 2, outcomes related to student achievement. A final major change is that there's much more emphasis on what you say about yourself as an institution on your website. Another quick word about each of these. When we think about the shift away from inputs, more towards outcomes, we can talk about that in terms of the 3 dimensions of quality. For a very long time, accreditation was focused on the input dimension of quality, on what the institution has as a measure of quality. And then the emphasis kind of shifted to what the institution does. So in the first example on the slide, it wasn't just that there were books and electronic databases in the library, it's that every now and then students used the books and the electronic databases. Now, for easily the last decade, where the action is in that 3rd dimension of quality, the outcomes dimension. It's not what you got, it's not what you do, it's what you and your students achieve. That's the important dimension of quality. As you write your self-study, as you move through all 9 standards, please make sure you're giving good attention to these 3 dimensions of quality with an extra little star, an extra soupçon next to the outcomes dimension. The clearest place where you'll find that is Standard 8, the new standard on educational effectiveness, also known as the Your Time to Shine standard. Your time to shine with your story of student success. Fitchburg State has a wonderful story to tell about student success, and Standard 8 gives you the opportunity to tell that story in all its glory. Yes, you have retention and graduation rates. How else do you measure student success? Take advantage of the opportunity that Standard 8, which you see printed on the screen right now, gives you to tell your rich, complex, nuanced story of how you define student success, how your students and graduates are successful in the world. Finally, a word on that third emphasis, public disclosure, largely captured in Standard 9, integrity, transparency, and public disclosure. Some of you know that we have a little nickname for Standard 9 around our offices. We call it the Aunt Miriam standard, because in our family, every family has, in our experience, every family has an Aunt Miriam who's got a niece who's a rising senior in high school and a nephew, little bit older, didn't have a chance to go to college right out of high school, but now both of them are trying to figure out where they should go to college in the future. Aunt Miriam's going to help them out, and she's going to do that by looking at your website. And what she wants to know is all of the things that you see on the screen right now, all of those dimensions of quality that Standard 9 say an accredited institution will disclose about itself. She wants to find that information quickly, easily. She wants to understand it when she gets there. We had a chance to talk to Aunt Miriam recently, and she told us what she and her niece and nephew are really interested in these days is, you guessed it, information on student success. How are your students successful? What are those retention and graduation rates? What are other measures, mission-appropriate measures of student success that they can find on your website? Maybe it is passage rates for licensure examinations, as the slide says. Maybe it's something else for Fitchburg State. Standard 8, Standard 9 together give you the opportunity to talk about what your measures of success are and how easily Aunt Miriam can find them on your website. So with that as a little bit about the standards, let's turn our attention now to the self-study itself. Here are a couple of quotes from commission publications about the self-study. Those of you who have been through this before, I think, would not disagree with the characterization in the first quote. It is an intensive endeavor. It's a boatload of work, but the commission hopes that you'll find it useful work, meaningful work that will lead to improvement at the institution. Ultimately, all of that work leads, as it says in the second quote on the slide, to a clear, concise, and accurate picture of Fitchburg State University, with an appreciation for who you have been, an understanding of who you are, and an articulation of who you intend to be in the future. In other words, self-study is as much a process as it is a product. At the end of the day, you'll have a document about 100 pages long that you'll call the self-study. But the process that you take, the journey, if you will, to get there is equally as important. A quick word about that process of self-study. You certainly want to involve the campus community. It's clearly the case that Alberto could go into his office one weekend, close the door, and write the whole darn self-study himself. But no, he won't do that, because that's not the way to get value from this process. You want to engage as many people as possible in this opportunity to look critically and reflectively at the institution. So you'll have committees that have experts in the standards, but also fresh eyes who can bring that different perspective, reflecting on your strengths and challenges as an institution, using the structures that are already in place so that this doesn't feel like a bolt on to something that you're already doing, but is well integrated into the work that you'll do for the next couple of years. Many institutions find it helpful to have a little internal website where progress on the self-study can be posted, so you can hear back from other members of the campus community their thoughts about what should go in the self-study. What does go in that self-study product? Here's a list of the elements in that holistic and integrated document. Starts with some data, the institutional characteristics, just the facts, ma'am, followed by an introduction that describes your self-study process. Who was involved in this journey of self-study? Was it just Alberto? Did he do the whole darn thing himself? Or did you involve faculty, staff, administrators, students, trustees? How did you prepare the self-study? The overview parachutes the readers of the self-study right into Fitchburg State University. And here you might keep in mind that there's at least 3 audiences for your self-study. First and foremost, don't be surprised when I say this, you yourselves are the audience for your self-study. You want this to be an internally useful document. Second audience is the visiting team that will come to your campus. Third audience, the commissioners themselves, who will make the decision about Fitchburg's accreditation status. That overview gives you the chance in about 5 pages to put in front of all of those readers the primary learnings of the self-study, to presage the major findings of the self-study. There'll be a narrative based on the standards, some more data forms because you can never have too many, and finally a small number of appendices to provide a little bit of extra information. The narrative is the heart of the self-study. It's about 100 pages long, 1 chapter for each of the standards. Some of you who have looked at the standards know that Standards 4 is a little bit longer than Standard 2, so the folks working on that chapter will get a few more pages, but ultimately you want it to be about 100 pages long. Embrace the challenge to say it all in 100 pages, because then you'll be putting in what's really most important. You'll probably hear me refer to it as your precious 100 pages. How will you spend it to tell the story of Fitchburg State University? You want to talk about, as it says in the second item on this slide, all students, all locations, all modalities. It can be easy to focus on just the students who are in front of you, and we do hope they'll be able to be in front of you in a physical classroom sometime soon. It's easy to focus on them, but you want to remember all the other students that you have. The Commission specified some areas of emphasis to receive special attention in the self-study. Those were communicated in a letter in 2017 to your institution, so you want to give good attention to those throughout your self-study. A reminder again to balance those 3 dimensions of quality: input, process, and outcome. And finally on this slide, a reminder that we will ask you to write the self-study in a 3-part analytic framework: description, appraisal, projection. How do we fulfill the standard? What are we doing? How well do we fulfill the standard? And what else will we do in the future? What commitments do we make for future improvement with respect to this particular standard? An encouragement on this slide to spend most of your time and energy on the heart, on appraisal and projection. You get the most value that way from the self-study process. It's easy to write description. It's easy to describe. It's a whole lot more fun to ask the how well question and the what else question. We know what we do. We can write about that concisely. To get value, let's talk about how well we do and where we know we need to improve. Couple of words about that last section of each chapter, the projection section. A few cautions, if you will. The projection section is not meant to be every good idea that anyone has ever had about Fitchburg State. That's a terrific place to start a conversation about projections. You don't want to land there. You also don't want to offer yourself self-advice, as it says in the second item. If you find yourself using the word should or must or needs to in your projection section, recalculate, recalibrate, and replace it with we will, we intend, rather than we should. Channel your 7th grade English teacher and use the active voice to the extent possible. Alas, as it says in the penultimate dot on this slide, the self-study is not an opportunity to advocate for more resources. There are other venues in which to do that. And finally, if you could see my face, you'll see that I'm smiling broadly right now. We would caution you in your projection section against vague platitudes. This is a beautiful statement of your mission. The Commission knows that you're going to continue to prepare students to lead, serve, and succeed. Is there a particular initiative that you're going to undertake over the next few years? Is there a particular dimension of this that will receive some energy? That's what you want to put in your projection section. Strong, helpful projections at this slide says are indeed linked to planning. Check that strategic planning document. They're realistic and they answer the reporter's questions. Who, what, when, and in some cases, how. Sometimes we'll get a self-study where at the end of each of the 9 chapters, there's about 14 projections of things that are going to be done within the next 6 months by the same 2 people. I'm ready to hire those people, but let's be honest, that's not realistic. What you want at the end of each chapter is the 2 or 3 things to which you can commit as a campus community to making improvements with respect to that particular standard on a realistic timeline, understanding these days that planning is made all the more difficult by COVID, and with the involvement of the campus community. I mentioned that there were data forms included in the self-study. These supplement that 100-page narrative that you're writing. There's 2 kinds of data forms. The data first forms, name is not an accident, let's put data first, and there's at least 1 data first form for each of the 9 standards. And as you can see on the slide, some of those ask for some trends over time, so you have the opportunity to look at the data over a period of time. There's a second set of forms called the student success forms, making assessment more explicit so that you have an opportunity through the form to supplement in your narrative what you say about how you go about the assessment of student learning. All of these forms are available on the NECHE website. A couple of words about how to use the data forms in the self-study process. Again, data first. The name is not a mistake. Start early with the forms so you can see what you have, what you don't have, what other data you might want to start to collect in order to do a good job with data in the self-study. Secondly, you're going to engage the campus community. You're doing that in the self-study. Let's have a conversation about the data that we have here and how we use it. Analyze those data and then incorporate the data into the narrative. Every now and then we'll get a self-study where the data in the forms seems to have no relationship whatsoever to the narrative that was written. I know that won't be the case for Fitchburg State. I know that you'll do a good job of incorporating, integrating your data into the narrative to make sure that the numbers and the words tell the same story. At the bottom of this slide, you see a quote by one of the patron saints of the commission, Yogi Berra, may he rest in peace. Yogi once opined, you can see a lot just by looking. So when you look at the data in the data first forms, in the student success forms, what do you see? What do you see about Fitchburg State? Write about that in your narrative. Here are the data first forms for Standard 8, the Your Time to Shine standard with respect to the assessment of student learning, and you're going to complete all of these that are appropriate for you. At Fitchburg State, I'm guessing you're going to be able to complete every single one of these because you have undergraduate retention and graduation rates. You also have other measures of student success appropriate to your mission. 8.2 gives you the chance to throw the door wide open and talk about your rich, complex, diverse understanding of student success. Put it right there in 8.2, write about it in Standard 8. 8.3, some very specific information. You're preparing students for licensure in some fields. Talk about those passage rates, job placement rates. And then in 8.4, your graduate programs, distance ed, and off-campus locations. Because remember, all students, all locations, all modalities. Sometimes people say, well, what's a good example of incorporating data into the narrative? And so here's a slide that gives you just a very quick example of that. You could write in Standard 8 that you're pleased that graduation rates have increased, although there's room for improvement. That's not a bad sentence, but it's data-free, isn't it? It's almost information-free. Look at the second part of the slide, how much richer the self-study becomes when you put in some data, when you supply some specifics, some specific information. So think about this as you're writing not only Standard 8, but really all of the standards. Are there ways that you can move beyond assertion to supporting those assertions with data? Data from the Data First forms and other data. Data First forms primarily have quantitative information. You've got a lot of qualitative information available to you. You've also got some marvelous anecdotal evidence, some marvelous stories about student success and other forms of success. Weave those into your self-study as well. Makes it all the richer, a much better read. All right, keys to a successful self-study. At the end of the day, if you can use each of these adjectives to describe your self-study, you can truly pat yourselves on the back and say, we did a terrific job. I'm going to pause just on the very first one of these, candid. You absolutely want to write a candid, honest self-study that, yes, talks about your strengths, but also notes where your areas of challenge are and articulates realistic plans to address those challenges. In the mind of the commission, that's a strong institution, one that knows itself well enough to say, we do a good job of this, we have room for improvement here, and here's how we're going to improve. If you take the approach of, we're not doing so well about this, so we're not going to mention it and hope that nobody notices it, I've got some bad news for you. Everyone else will notice. The team will notice, the commission will notice, and they'll say to themselves, what's wrong with this place? We can see clearly they have some room for improvement here. How come they can't see it? So write about it. Say it loud, say it proud. We have many strengths. We know we need to improve. Here's how we're going to make those improvements. Commission is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, and that's the reason why your students have access to federal financial aid. The department requires the commission to check up on its institutions periodically with respect to the things that you see on the slide right now. So we would ask you to please make sure that these are represented in your self-study, that you've got good processes in place to verify the identity of your distance education students, that you have a transfer policy, that Aunt Miriam and her niece and nephew can find it easily on your website. And when they get it, they'll see that it includes the criteria for the acceptance of transfer credit and the list of institutions with which you have articulation agreements. The next item on the slide is the one that always suggests to me that no one at the U.S. Department of Education has ever stepped foot on a college campus because they're concerned that students don't know how to complain. Now, we love our students. They're the reason we get out of bed every morning, but God bless them, they know how to complain. The department needs assurance that at Fitchburg State, you have a grievance policy, a complaint policy, students can find it easily, and when you have to administer it, you do so fairly and equitably. All joking aside, we know some students can sometimes feel hesitant about doing that, so the department needs assurance that you've got good policies and procedures in place. And then finally, when you have a self-study, you want to give members of the public an opportunity to submit public comments. All those comments go to your president, who is given the opportunity to write a response. Both the comments and the response go to the commission when they review the institution. Very quickly, very, very quickly, because our time is winding down, I want to say a word about the second and third parts of the process, the site visit and the commission review. Site visit will take place from a Sunday afternoon to a Wednesday morning. There'll be about 8 or 9 team members who will come from peer institutions, other state universities, not from Massachusetts, of course, but from other places in New England, and perhaps even 1 or 2 from outside New England. Good peers for you, institutions that are like Fitchburg State. Each of the members of the team will bring some knowledge about 1 or more of the standards. They're going to want to meet with anybody and everybody they can get their hands on. They're going to want to meet with faculty, staff, students, trustees, administrators. They're validating the self-study that you've written. They're confirming that your strengths that you've written about are indeed your strengths. They'll validate, yes, those are needed areas for improvement, and by gum, your plans are indeed realistic. So they're going to meet with anybody they can. They'll also have access in a team room, I would say 99% of the time, electronic access to some supporting documents, because the self-study, as wonderful as it is only 100 pages, and so you'll want to supplement that with some additional documents. Finally, on the last morning, Wednesday morning, the team, through its leader, the team chairperson, will deliver an exit report where they deliver a summary of their major findings, strengths and challenges facing the institution. All of that gets compiled into a report that you get an opportunity to check for factual accuracy, and then to write a response, a formal response to the team report that will go to the commission. The team also makes a confidential recommendation to the commission about what the commission should decide with respect to Fitchburg State's accreditation status. It's a recommendation only because the team doesn't make the decision, the commission does. And the commission makes its decision, it takes its action the semester following the site visit. It has available to it all of those written materials. It also has the opportunity to meet with both the president of the university and the individual who chaired the visiting team. And there's about an hour-long conversation that they have with members of the commission about Fitchburg State comprehensive evaluation. Commission bases its decision on all of that, and the decision is communicated in a letter to the president that gives the decision, the reasons for it, and then any follow-up reporting. The commission does see accreditation as an ongoing relationship with that self-study process that takes about 1.5 to 2 years, an interim report in the middle of that 10-year cycle, and then special reports or focused visits as may be requested by the commission. Sometimes the commission will say, there's a lot going on at Fitchburg State. We don't want to wait 5 years to hear back from the institution about that work that they're doing in assessment or the work that they're doing in distance education. We want to hear about it in 2 or 3 years. And so after the results of the comprehensive evaluation are communicated, you may see, in addition to an interim report, a progress report, for example. Sometimes institutions will be disappointed if they see that. They'll think, darn, we didn't get A+. If we had only gone directly to the interim report, we would have gotten A+. And I encourage you not to feel discouraged or disheartened if the letter comes back from the commission saying, progress report in 2 years, interim report in 5 years. Institutions of higher education are so complex, the pace of change is so extraordinary that the commission is finding more often than not that it wants to hear sooner rather than later from institutions. You may be thinking, I bet at least one of you is thinking, why would we do all of this? Why would we go through this 2-year process, this ongoing relationship? Well, this slide communicates what we believe to be the benefits of accreditation. Most people, when they think about these, their eyes go directly to the bottom, that federal financial aid, easier transfer of academic credit, that important assurance of quality to members of the general public. But I would encourage you as well to think about the benefits at the top of the slide, the opportunity to welcome a team to campus, to engage in a systematic process of self-review, to use data for improved decision-making. If you're wondering about more information, please check the NECHE website. You can contact any of us. You can have our contact information at the NECHE staff section of our website. If you want to know what another institution has done with a self-study, please Google or have your president contact theirs, your vice president contact their vice president. We don't give out self-studies. That's your document, your decision about with whom you share it. We would certainly encourage you to share it widely if that's what you'd like to do, but you can certainly Google and find other institutions' self-study. Our time has come to an end. It's hard to believe it always goes so quickly. I know we'll have some moments for questions when this formal presentation is over. I also want you to have my contact information so that if questions arise as we go along, as you go along in the self-study process, you can feel free to reach out to me by email or by phone. Thank you so much for your attention this morning, and I very much look forward to your questions, comments, and insights in the next part of this morning's program. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Caney, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs. First, let me thank Dr. Pat O'Brien for being with us today and providing the overview of accreditation. We are grateful to have the support of the NECHE staff to assist Fitchburg State in preparing for our accreditation. Dr. Janine Deptula from our Psychological Science Department and myself have been appointed to oversee our preparation and process for our comprehensive 10-year accreditation review. We are honored to take on this work and looking forward to working with all of you to write our self-study. It has been my pleasure to serve this institution for over 30 years. So engaging in the work to tell our story through a self-study report is much more than an act of service for me. It is an opportunity to reflect on our collective work and articulate the ways in which we appropriately serve our students, staff, and faculty. Through our self-reflection and data analysis, we will find areas to improve, which is essential for our institution to remain effective. Our institutional quality within all of its dimensions is something each one of us has a critical role in maintaining. As we stand here in the NECHE Science Building looking over our beautiful quad just before the start of another academic year, I am reminded that it is the first year for many of our students' educational journey and the final year for so many others. Given what is happening in the world on so many levels, our work to ensure the institutional effectiveness of Fitchburg State could never be more important. I am grateful to be able to work with Janine and all of you on this critical accreditation work.
For those of you who do not know me, I'm Janine Deptula, professor in the Psychological Science Department. This year will be my 14th year at Fitchburg State, and in that time I've been involved in multiple types of program reviews, including for external accrediting agencies at both the undergraduate and graduate level. I want to acknowledge that this will indeed be a historic year for our university. As Kathy explained, this self-study is critical for the ongoing success of our university. At the same time, because of the ongoing pandemic, we're also facing many uncertainties and unique challenges. Some of these challenges are professional, such as learning new technologies to help students remotely. Some of these challenges are personal, such as homeschooling, individual and family health concerns, or feelings of social isolation. However, these challenges also give us the opportunity to show the resiliency of our campus. Just as we demonstrated last spring when we quickly pivoted to remote operations, we will demonstrate that we can still be successful in fulfilling our mission while we face these challenges. Next, we're going to share with you some pre-recorded PowerPoint slides that outline the timeline and committee structure for the process.
Dr. Deptula and I will give a broad overview of our accreditation process and timeline. Accreditation review is both a product and a process. This overview will hopefully help you understand the basic structure and process. Many more details will become available as the process unfolds. The preparation for our accreditation review is over a 2-year process. This work involves the creation of a self-study document in which we tell our story. This report includes a 100-page narrative along with lots of data forms and appendices. This past spring, we shared a broad outline of the process and timelines, the one included on the previous slide, with various campus constituents, including AUC and the Graduate Council. We wanted to provide notification that our 10-year accreditation was upon us and that planning would commence. Our formal accreditation review takes place in March 2022. As we've already noted, the university appointed Dr. Deptula and myself as co-chairs to oversee the process. In my role as Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, I also serve as the NECHE liaison. We invited both faculty and staff to volunteer to serve on committees so that we could construct committee membership before the fall semester. In our last 10-year accreditation review process, we did that outreach in the fall, which meant committees were not formed and able to meet until late fall. We hope that this adjustment to the process will be helpful. This past summer, the Office of Institutional Research and Planning began compiling data required to support our self-study work. A small planning team with staff from that office, along with the co-chairs and provosts, began organizing and planning. We are here today beginning the process of helping our campus community understand why we go through the process of accreditation, and how Fitchburg State will specifically facilitate that work. We are grateful that Dr. O'Brien from NECHE was able to join us today and assist with this work. NECHE will host a workshop in October for institutions up for accreditation in 2022 to help us prepare. Representatives from Fitchburg State will attend this workshop and apply what we learned to the process. Our committees writing the self-study will convene this fall and begin working on first drafts. Deneen will speak more about this in a couple of minutes. We will also hire a document editor this fall that will assist with editing and compiling committee drafts into one coherent voice. During the spring 2021 semester, committees will continue to work on drafts with a goal of finishing a draft report by the end of the spring semester. This will give us time to share a draft with NECHE staff for review. It is important to complete a draft early enough to allow NECHE staff to review and provide feedback. The draft will be broadly shared, allowing everyone to provide input. Activities such as open forums will facilitate gathering input. During the summer of 2021, our self-study editor will spend time editing the draft, bringing the voice of multiple committees into one. In addition, we will be required to add the most recent year's data to the report, and logistical planning for the spring 2022 visit will begin. In the fall of 2021, the final self-study draft will be submitted through governance as well as the Board of Trustees. We will continue to seek feedback and use various means to allow all of you to lend your voice. The final self-study report needs to be submitted to NECHE in January 2022, allowing time for the visiting team conducting our evaluation to read, review, and prepare. The visiting team, consisting of peers from other institutions, will visit and conduct the formal evaluation of Fitchburg State, arriving on Sunday, March 20th, 2022, and finishing their work on Wednesday, March 23rd. I noted at least a couple of times in previous slides that we would be compiling data. Using data for analysis will enable us to reflect on our good work, but will also help us to identify areas for improvement. Thanks to the work of the staff of the Office of Research and Planning, as well as staff from other offices across campus, data was compiled this summer that we will be able to provide to our standard committees at the beginning of their work this fall. This is another adjustment we made from our 2012 accreditation process. Deneen will now walk us through the committee structure and the standards.
Thank you, Kathy. Committees to address the NECHE standards have been populated with both faculty and staff representatives. Faculty were appointed to committees by the MSCA last spring, and staff representatives were finalized this summer. Co-chairs of the committees will be convening meetings shortly. I'll be providing a very brief overview of the standards and provide some examples of specific areas they will be assessing. This is by no means intended to be comprehensive, but just to give you a brief taste as to what the standard includes. You will also be able to see the composition of the committee membership as well. Because standards 1, 2, and 3 tend to be shorter compared to the other standards, they've been combined and will be addressed by one committee. This group will be evaluating the mission of the university, including evidence that the mission is used to provide direction for our academic curriculum. We're asked to reflect on our strategic planning and our success in implementing this planning. Standard 3 assesses our organizational structure and how decisions are made. This includes both our governing board as well as our methods of internal governance. The academic program is covered in Standard 4. How do we assure that our programs have strong academic quality and integrity? We'll be providing evidence of the quality of our programs with respect to the general education program, our undergraduate degree programs, and our graduate degree programs. This standard also examines our policies regarding transfer credit, dual enrollment programs, and online courses. Standard 5 examines student diversity and student success. To that end, the standard considers our admissions process, including student recruitment and evaluation of student readiness for success. Standard 5 also includes the role of student services, including co-curricular activities, physical and mental health services, advising and academic support, financial aid, and athletic programs. Standard 6 reflects the aspects of university teaching, learning, and scholarship. There are two subcategories in the standard, consisting first of an examination of issues specific to faculty and academic staff. Just a few of the items in this area include consideration of faculty qualifications and recruitment, faculty evaluation, and academic freedom. The second subcategory reflects broader issues of teaching and learning and considers methods of instruction, the match with generally accepted academic standards, and efforts by the university to enhance the quality of the university's teaching and learning. Standard 7, Institutional Resources, examines the extent to which we have sufficient resources to support our mission. These resources include human resources, financial resources, the library, as well as physical and technological resources. Some specific areas to be assessed include human resource policies, processes for financial planning, library access, IT policies, and overall financial stability. Standard 8 explicitly examines student achievement and effectiveness, specifically with respect to our university mission. Key areas of the standard include our assessment strategy, such as measuring of student progress, retention, transfer rates, and employment. The use of a variety of assessment methods is emphasized. Our use of that data to improve programs and student services and allocate resources is also assessed by the standard. Standard 9 involves the ethical standards and behaviors of the university. Subsections of the standard consist of examination of issues of integrity, transparency, and public disclosure. For instance, this standard reflects the use of non-discriminatory policies and practice. Another area in the standard is providing the public and prospective students transparent information about admission, employment, and student discipline issues, as well as clear information about financial costs. The university is also called to publish information about the university mission, faculty, and programs, and accreditation status. Now, we invite you to a question and answer period. The Google Meet session will be hosted by Drs. Alberto Cardelle, Patricia O'Brien, Kathy Canny, and me. Please join us by navigating to the Google Meet session, which will be held from 10 until 10:15.